Welcome back, and joining me now is Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Governor Walz, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good to be with you, Kristen. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Thanks you so much for being here. I do want to start with the tragic shooting of the two National Guard service members. In the aftermath of the shooting, as you know, President Trump has responded by vowing to crack down on refugees, including from countries beyond Afghanistan, specifically targeting the Somali community in your home state. He also described you using a slur widely regarded as derogatory toward people with intellectual disabilities. I want to read for you what he said, Governor, and get your reaction on the other side. He said, hundreds of thousands of refugees from Somalia are completely taking over the once great state of Minnesota. Somalian gangs are roving the streets looking for prey as our wonderful people stay locked in their apartments and houses, hoping against hope they'll be left alone. The seriously blank governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, does nothing, either through fear, incompetence, or both. What is your response to President Trump, Governor?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me express my condolences to the families of the National Guardsmen. They're out there doing their duty. They serve us. As a commander-in-chief of the National Guard and someone who served, we have a responsibility to put them in a position where they're protected and they have a clear mission. And so I would express my condolences there. Look, Donald Trump insulting me is a badge of honor for me, but I think we all know, both as an educator for a couple decades and as a parent, using that term is just so damaging. It's hurtful. We have fought 3 decades to get this out of our schools. Kids know better than to use it. But look, this is what Donald Trump has done. He's normalized this type of hateful behavior and this type of language. And mainly, look, at first, I think it's just because he's not a good human being. But secondly, to distract from his incompetency. We know we just came through a Thanksgiving where prices are up. We know people are concerned about heating their homes as we're experiencing blizzards out here at the same time he's cutting those programs. So, look, we cannot allow this to be normalized. The people who, Trump is, like this is language police, you guys are woke. Many times it's just about being decent to people and making them feel included. You can use that word, sure, you can use that language, but you shouldn't. And that's something that Donald Trump fails to realize. But again, Kristen, this is cruelness, this is meanness, it's aimed at a broader community. And as far as demonizing our Somali community, maybe he could help us on some things. Demonizing an entire community, folks who are in the professions, educators, artists, doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, they bring the diversity and the energy to a place like Minnesota. And for him to just randomly decide to do this, it makes no sense. Do your job. Get the criminals out, secure our border, but do it with dignity and respect to the American tradition of respecting immigrants and refugees as a beacon of hope.
Well, speaking of the Somali community, President Trump is targeting them and your state in part. He's citing fraud as the reason for his crackdown. Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can. But to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy. And as you heard Senator Kelly say, this president has cut a lot of inspector generals. He's cut programs that could help us tackle this on. So we'll take it on. We'll put folks in jail. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care what your religion is, your color. If you're committing crimes, these are programs that were meant to serve students with autism, to housing, and to making sure people had enough to eat. There's a reason Minnesota ranks as the top. Lowest childhood poverty, best place for children to live. People are taking advantage of that, they're going to prison. That is totally disconnected with demonizing an entire group of people who came here fleeing civil war and created a vibrant community that makes Minnesota and this country better. But that's Donald Trump. Deflect, demonize, come up with no solutions. He's not going to help fix anything on fraud. My God, there's a big difference between fraud and corruption is something he knows about.
Well, Governor, let me have you weigh in on this, because part of your initial response to President Trump's post was to call for him to release the results of his MRI. And I want to give you a chance to give our viewers exactly a sense of what you mean. What exactly were you suggesting by that, Governor?
Well, here we got a guy on Thanksgiving where we spent time with our families, we ate, we played Yahtzee, we cheered for football or whatever. This guy is apparently in a room ranting about everything else. This is not normal behavior. It is not healthy. And presidents throughout time have released a couple things. They've released their tax returns, not Donald Trump, and they've released their medical records, not Donald Trump. And look, the MRI is one thing, but I think what's most concerning about this is, as your viewers out there are listening, has anyone in the history of the world ever have an MRI assigned to them and have no idea what it was for, as he says? So look, it's clear the president's fading physically. I think the mental capacity, again, ranting, crazily at midnight on Thanksgiving about everything else, there's reasons for us to be concerned. This is a guy that randomly says the airspace over Venezuela is closed. He's ruminating on if you could win a nuclear war. Look, this is a serious position. It's the most powerful position in the world. And we have someone at midnight throwing around slurs that demonize our children. And at the same time, he's not solving any of the problems. So I'm deeply concerned that he is incapable of doing the job.
Governor, a couple more to get to here. I want to talk about the Democrats. You were, of course, the Democratic vice presidential nominee in 2024 because President Biden dropped out over concerns about his fitness for office. Vice President Harris, in her new book, said it was, quote, recklessness for former President Biden's allies to leave the decision about running for re-election up to him and his family. Do you agree with her? Was it recklessness?
Look, I wasn't there, Kristen, on this, and I think the president, again, got us through COVID, ushered us through, brought the economy back from the edge. I think there's question about this, and I want to be very clear. On me talking about the MRI, ageism is a real thing. Ableism is a real thing that we need to be careful of with people, and I think Donald Trump made a cottage industry out of attacking Joe Biden's competency, and it seemed like that got reported a lot. Now, whether that decision should have been made sooner, history will determine that. What I do know is that going forward, we need somebody in office who's actually going to tackle the things Americans need, whether it's about costs or whether it's about our national security needs and honoring those with our allies. And I think maybe there's a lesson to be learned from what happened with President Biden. If that's the case, it should certainly be applied right now to this president who is putting Americans at risk, is reckless, and is not doing what he's asked to do, make life better for the American people.
All right, let me turn to the future. Former Vice President Kamala Harris has left the door open to potentially run for office again. Do you still think she's the strongest person to run for president in 2028?
Well, I'm glad she's out there, and I'm glad a whole lot of other people are out there, because I think Donald Trump sucks up so much oxygen. We need to have the Democratic Party out on the field, the broad, inclusive Democratic Party, talking about making life more affordable, talking about protecting freedoms, and I think Kamala Harris does a wonderful job with that. If she chooses to run, that betters all of us. We will have the process. We'll go through. I'm sure there'll be a lot of folks throw their hat into the ring, but that's good, and we need to make sure that we're providing the alternative that America's asking for. If they're going to elect us, we need to make sure health care costs come down. We need to make sure prices come down. We need to make sure that we're addressing the things that they care about, whether it's clean water or protecting environment. Those are things they want to see us get done. And I think she had a message last year that I'm proud of. I think, did it break through enough? Obviously not, but it's still a message that works, making sure that America is affordable for all, people feel included, and we tackle the toughest problems.
All right, Governor Walz, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.